Alright, in the sequel to Creepshow, this one came out in 1987, so it has some of that 80s cheese. I'm not as big as a fan of the sequel as I am as the first one. But George Romero didn't direct this one, but the cinematographer from the first movie came in to direct. Apparently he wrote the stories though. But the stories were based on Stephen King. They reek of Stephen King. And then George A. Romero did the dialogue for the stories. But it didn't attract as many big name actors as the first one did. And they only did 3 stories in this one. And they didn't really do the same effects, the same crossover of comic book effects like they did in the first one. In this one, they did it more animated sequences in between, and they got a host for it. Kind of like how these are based off the EC comics from the 50s, like I was saying, and those had hosts that introduced. They had the Old Witch, the Vault Keeper, and the Crypt Keeper, who would introduce the stories in the comic book. You could still read them online. They're free domain. Check those out. This one had the Creeper, and here's a shot of him. Joe Silver did the voice, and there was a live-action sequence of him dropping off the comic books in the morning, and that was played by Tom Savini. So Tom Savini did the effects, so the effects are there throughout the movie, but the acting and performances and stories aren't as good as the first one. Anyway, now that I introduced most of it, let's go.
It moved at a decent pace, very good.
Like I was saying, this one had more 80s cheese than this one compared to the one that came out. This is the first one that came out in the early 80s. The first story's Old Chief Woodhead. I don't really like this story. Actually, first off, it's the noble Indian. He shows up and he gives him the freaking turquoise memorabilia.
He gives him the Indian jewels.
So stereotypical. And then then obviously the 3 goons. They're total characters.
Total characters. And then the guy's freaking like talking about his long hair the whole time. Like, I'm going to Hollywood, man.
The guy's so into himself, he was like, you know that one movie with that one guy? Yeah, I look better than him.
Shit's hilarious. And he's just like...
But the 2 goons with him were like, just total improv, and they like didn't even have lines. They were like walking around the store like opening bags of Cheetos and shit.
He's like, this long hair is gonna get me paid and laid in Hollywood.
And you're like, give it up.
Like, yeah, an Indian that's skinny as hell, long hair.
It's such a story. Then the Indian in the cupboard comes to life.
The
Chief
Indian
Wiggum.
In the cupboard, the freaking Chief
Wiggum.
Wiggum.
His freaking death scene of like the shadow, and it shows the splatter on the wall. That is so dope.
Yeah, it's a pretty good kill.
It's been done in another movie. I can't think of it at the moment.
Movies,
not really, not that way specifically. Someone might be able to mention it, but anyway, I'm gonna keep this review short. Let's move to the raft story. So yeah, they went swimming, the group of 4, and
before that though, it cuts to the creeper, and he's in the castle. It's the dope artwork, and he's feeding the lizard.
It reminds you of the Tales from the Crypt cartoon show in the 90s.
It's pretty dope.
Oh yeah, the lizard, that's dope. When you're feeding the lizard.
Alright,
the
so
animated sequences are so dope, yeah.
Goes to the
Overall.
raft. And this story's pretty upfront and quick. Like, they start off smoking a doobie, like, on the way there in the car.
It's just such a good... It's the best one out of the 3 by far. And then, like, the good girl smokes a cigarette out of nowhere, so you're like, you know...
Once they get to the raft, even though, like, all their squares would be wet.
So
he had him in his freaking one piece.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. What's the deal?
I know.
Anyway, she gets Stephen King'd on the raft.
She totally gets Stephen King worship.
With the blob coming over. Okay, I gotta say
the
this.
Effects are pretty good with
in the
this.
early 90s, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I remember I came home, my dad was watching a horror movie.
He's gotta say this.
And I've never been able to find this horror movie. It's similar to The Raft, where a group of like young 20-somethings go out to a lake, and a blob kind of consumes one of the guy, and the friends leave him behind, and he goes to pick off his friends one by one, and they show like his figure. He turns into like an animated figure basically. It's like a Freddy Krueger type look of an animated Freddy Krueger type.
Of an animated Freddy Krueger.
And it's like 80s like style. I'll give you more details if it comes to mind, if you have any idea, if any knowledge of 80s horror movies. I've searched. It's got to be from the late 80s, anywhere from like the mid 80s, late 80s to early 90s. Anyway, final thoughts on this one? Yeah, they do a bunch. The blob like. No, I'm saying the blob like takes the guy through the one. That's pretty dope. Anyway, dope story. Move on to the last one, the hitchhiker.
The special effects were awesome with that blob though, making it look all raw like they were decaying as they were eating. But anyways, next story. So it's the hitchhiker, and Stephen King's like, I think he looks like a black guy. Just something.
Yeah. Stephen King is the trucker in this.
She's cheating on her husband.
Yeah, everyone knows this story anyway. Like, it's kind of like a comic book story, you could say. All of them are kind of comic book stories of like monster stories kind of coming to life. I'm saying that's why they try to make them outlandish.
So she's leaving her mistress. She nails the dude. He's all bloody and gory. She leaves. A hit and run, and she's a cheating wife bitch.
And the hitchhiker's like stalking him on top of the car, and he won't die. And the effects are just amazing gore, and it gets so bloody, and it kind of gets kind of old and redundant because it just keeps on going and going and going. But it's like a comic book zombie type, so whatever, you buy into it, you get it, what they were going for. But he just wants a ride. And she just wants to cheat on her husband. It's that simple.
It's that simple. I mean, you'll watch that last story, and then
the guy gets on his 80s car phone.
He just wants a ride. Oh yeah, the 80s car phone. He's like, I don't know what happened. Some guy hit this. Somebody hit this guy.
That's it. We're gonna keep it brief now.
The line's hilarious when the other people show up and they're like, "What happened?" And Stephen King's like, "What do you mean what happened?"
I'm gonna give it overall 7.5 rafts out of 10.
Happens every day. No, I'll give it a. Well, it's nothing compared to the first Creepshow. Shut up. But
and watch the making of Creepshow, the Altar 4. Just uploaded it.
I give it a 7 or an 8.
I get a 7.5.